You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense.
Whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots.
And welcome to it, everyone. This is the Blake Johnson program on the Lanterns Radio Network. We are here to fix the machine as always. And we are only a week away from Christmas. Now, some of you may be wondering, are you going to do a show on Christmas Day? Well, I'm here to tell you the answer is yes, I will be doing that. And mainly because since this isn't officially a live show yet, I can pre-record these, so, I'm not technically doing a show on Christmas Day, it's just airing on Christmas Day, so, yeah, a bit of a cop-out, I understand, but, it's just one of those things. Plus, I like doing this show, so I thought it'd be kind of cool if we did something special for Christmas Day. So yes, next Monday, this show still plans to be on the air, it just will be a different show, and I'm going to try to focus pretty much exclusively on everything but politics and news. Just have some fun and enjoy the Christmas season together. A lot of things happened over the weekend that I will talk about. Coming up on the show, I'm going to give you both a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review of the new Star Wars movie. I went and saw it over the weekend twice, actually, so I have a pretty cemented idea of what I think about this film in the 9-episode series of the Skywalker saga. I've got a lot to say about it, and I don't know, it's, I feel like a lot more people are agreeing with where I am on it, and after seeing it the second time, it just further validated what I think about this, not just this movie, but Disney's direction of this franchise. So, the plan is going to give you a non-spoiler review first for those of you who haven't seen it yet. So, if you want to hear that, you can. And don't worry, not going to tell you anything that happens in it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you have seen it, I will take a break and then come back and do a spoiler review of The-Last-Jedi. So, if you haven't seen it yet, you can listen to the non-spoiler, skip the next segment, and then come back and listen to the rest of the show and be completely fine. But I feel it would be a good idea, especially since a lot of you probably have either seen it or are planning to see it, are kind of curious what my take is, since you probably know by now, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. So, that is coming up. And, we will talk more about that along with news of the day, things like that. I want to start off, though, by talking about something that I thought was really, really refreshing over the weekend and towards the end of last week. And it's Donald Trump's new America First national security policy and what he has been up to in the past few days. If you have kept on top of it at all, you'll know, like I do, that he's been doing a pretty good job in terms of not being a globalist. One of the things that I've always had an issue with past presidents is this idea of, we've got to spread, the American system to other countries. We've got to send our troops over to other countries and to be involved in everything that everyone else is doing. And I just don't think that's been working. We've spent billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, and it hasn't really done anything. It hasn't worked. Nations need to figure out if they want to be like us, then they've got to be like us. We can't force anyone to be like us. We can't do it. And not enough money, not enough troops, not enough of any of that is going to decide it. They are going to have to decide it. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm an isolationist either. I don't think that it's a good idea that we should just cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. I think it's good to have some influence, and I think it's good to have diplomatic relations with other countries. I just think there has to be a balance between that and having troops spread across the globe and having our resources becoming more and more limited. But thankfully, with President Trump, that seems to be heading in a different direction. Let me read to you part of this piece from One News Now. Trump's plan to unveil his America First policy over national security later today. I mean, he's already unveiled it today, but just going over some of it. Now, as you may know, Trump ran over this platform of America First, putting ourselves above the other countries. Not saying that we don't care about other countries, but since we are the United States, then we should fix our own problems first. We should take care of ourselves first, because if we don't, we're certainly in no place to take care of everybody else. And this plan is going to focus on 4 main themes. Number 1, protecting the homeland and the way of life. Number 2, promoting American prosperity. Number 3, demonstrating peace through strength, one of Ronald Reagan's platforms. And 4, advancing American influence in an ever-competitive world. Trump's doctrine holds that nation-states are in perpetual competition and that the U.S. must fight on all fronts to protect and defend its sovereignty from friend and foe alike. While the administration often says that America First does not mean America alone, this national security strategy to be presented by Trump will make clear that the U.S. will stand up for itself. Now this is where it gets really good. The last such strategy document, prepared by then-President Barack Obama in 2015, declared climate change, quote, an urgent and growing threat to our national security, end quote. A senior official said that the Trump plan removes that determination. It gets rid of climate change as a list of global threats, as a list of threats to our national security. And this follows the administration's pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, which still to this day I say is one of the best things that this president has done. But at the same time, the Trump administration does plan to stress the importance of environmental stewardship, which, I mean, I'm completely fine with. I mean, that's in the Bible too. As a Christian, we should care about taking care of the environment. The problem is, when you get into climate change and global warming and things like that, it's about money. It's about power. That's what this really comes down to. It's been proven time and time again through science, statistics, proven data, that the global warming hysteria is just that. Hysteria. It's not true. It's not a thing. And this climate change is no exception to that. It's just another effort by the left to reword a scam. And that's what this is. Now, despite the potential isolation, the risk of isolation presented by Trump's strategy, its fundamentals are not surprised. The Associated Press last week reviewed excerpts of a late draft of the roughly 70-page document and spoke to 2 people familiar with it. The draft emphasizes that U.S. economic security is national security, and that economic security must be ensured with military might. And they said it would stress the U.S. is interested only in relationships with other countries, including alliances like NATO that are fair and reciprocal. Trump, according to the senior officials, is also expected to discuss threats he'll deem as rogue regimes like North Korea and revisionist powers like Russia and China, who aim to change the status quo, like Moscow and its actions with the Ukraine and Georgia, and Beijing and the South China Sea. Trump is also planning to renew his call for the member states and the UN and NATO to spend more on defense, saying that the U.S. will insist on its alliances being fair and reciprocal. He also wants to stress the importance of declaring that radical Islamic regimes like ISIS and others should be condemned, and that we should encourage political stability. And one of the big ways to do that is to side with Israel, like he did a couple of weeks ago in declaring Jerusalem Israel's capital and saying we are moving our U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. And in this document, it states that, we've realized that Israel is not the problem here. They're not the reason why there's been a lack of peace in the Middle East, why there's been some conflict. It's not Israel's fault. If anything, they've been doing everything they can to bring peace. States have increasingly found common interest with Israel in confronting common threats. This is from part of the document. The president is going to make his case that the U.S. economic security is national security. Okay, I already said that. Let's see. Senior officials spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss the plan before the president's remarks. The early draft of the strategy reviewed by the AP lamented that America had put itself at a disadvantage by entering into multinational agreements, such as those aimed at combating climate change and introducing domestic policies to implement them. So, calling out the Obama administration, saying that these strategies do not work, and we've got to change course, which I completely agree with. And that's been a very, like I said, refreshing aspect of the Trump administration, the fact that they are not into globalism. Globalism is something that has dramatically hurt our interests, and I continue to believe that we should not be in the United Nations. The United Nations it really hasn't, as an organization, for one thing, kept nations united, but it's also not helped bring peace in places like the Middle East. It hasn't stepped up in regards to ISIS, in regards to the threat of Putin in Russia. It hasn't stepped up in regards to North Korea, the rising threat of North Korea and China, and all those things. It's taken a back seat, and in some cases condemned our efforts to stand out and to stand up for ourselves. When you look at that, you begin to see for the past few decades, we have been living the definition of insanity. We've just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again, albeit with a different administration, but expecting things to turn out differently, and it hasn't been doing that. So we've got to change course. We've got to figure out, how do we both stand by our allies? How do we both promote peace around the world, but at the same time not do so by, enslaving ourselves to more debt and, trying to force nations to do something that the people don't necessarily want to do? I'm sorry, but, there are places in the Middle East and around the world that just don't want to do what we've done as America. They don't want to really live in a free and just society. They like their corrupt system, and they don't understand freedom. Now, that kind of goes back to promoting peace. There has to be ways that we as a country can promote the idea of liberty and freedom without it costing so much money. If we would just rein in the debt, if we would just rein in spending, if we would just rein in taxes and, shrink the size of government and make it to where Washington becomes less and less relevant, then we would have some measure of consistency. But the problem is, if we really want to, spread the idea that the American system is the best system, then we've got to start living that system ourselves. But we haven't been doing that for quite some time. We have drifted from many of our founding principles. We have drifted from the ideas of self-governance, of personal freedom, personal responsibility. The government that governs best governs least. Getting the government out of things that just simply are not in the Constitution. I love these people who are just, in such a hysteria over net neutrality being taken away. They think that, this whole system is just going to burn itself to the ground because the government isn't involved. Oh, I know. It's just such a heartbreaker, isn't it? Friends of mine are just melting down over the fact that net neutrality is no longer a thing. And it's things like that make me concerned for the future of this country. We have future generations rising up, and they will be part of the majority, if you will, of the voting populace. And with the way our education system is screwed up, the way that indoctrination through liberal progressivism is being spread across many aspects of our culture, the fact that many in my generation are simply, they just do not simply care. They are so lazy and brainwashed and arrogant and being infected with socialism and communism and Marxism. It makes me wonder, what is the future of this country going to look like? What are the future leaders of this country going to be? Because the leaders of the country represent us as a people. We choose who we want to be. We can rail against Congress, we can rail against the president all day long. But in reality, they are merely a reflection of us. Because we have continued to vote these people in, and we continue to allow this system to do what it's doing. So if we really want to change things, we've got to change ourselves first. America first. That is the strategy, and I believe it's one that will really shape this country and hopefully turn it around for the better. But the only way that can happen is with us first. Back in a minute. So I'm not going to take too much time on this segment. Thank you for joining us, everyone, by the way, on the Blake Johnson program. If you want to check out the show, the past programs, you can just go to Spreaker.com and look up Lanterns Radio Network, and you'll find my show, the Blake Johnson program, up there. Or you can just go to lanterns.buzz and search for the Blake Johnson program, and they should have all of the shows on there as well. You can go to platforms like iTunes and Stitcher and iHeartRadio. So far, I've found iHeartRadio is the best one in terms of, ease of access and being able to find all the shows. If you just type in the Blake Johnson program in the search, you should be able to find it. At least I have on first try. So just go there. You can also go to SoundCloud, and I believe we're on YouTube as well. Just check out the show on there, and follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Blake Johnson Program on Facebook, and Libertyville93 on Twitter. Okay, so let's get into some nerd territory here. If you have not seen Star Wars The Last Jedi, I'm going to give you a non-spoiler review of it. I'm not going to tell you about anything that happens in it. I'm not going to give too much away. I'm just going to tell you the overall feel of what I have for this movie. If you have seen The Last Jedi, then stick around, because after this segment, I'm going to give you a spoiler review of The Last Jedi. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, after this segment, just skip the next one and come back. I want to say about, maybe give it about 15 minutes, and then come back and listen to the rest of the show and go from there. But I'm trying to give reviews for both groups of people. As you know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love pretty much all the movies. There hasn't been a movie that I've disliked until now, unfortunately. So many of you who know me, or some of you may be curious as to what I thought about it. I've been asked several times what I thought about the new movie. And I gotta tell you, when I first went and saw it, I saw it twice. I saw it on Saturday, on a date. I went on a date Saturday, took a girl to see it, and went and saw it the first time. And honestly, there was so much that happened in it, I couldn't wrap my mind around all of it. And plus, I knew I was going to come back the next day, watch it again. So most of my time was just, enjoying the fact that there was another Star Wars movie playing, and enjoying the fact that I was on a date. So that was pretty nice, pretty nice. But then when I came back and watched it again, being fully able to digest everything, because it's a pretty intense movie in terms of just throwing out a lot of stuff at you and not being able to take it all in. After seeing it the second time, I can tell you honestly, and keep this in mind too, I'm a huge fan of the prequels. I love the Star Wars prequels. So there's a fair chance that you might disagree with my opinion, but there's a lot of people that feel the same way. People that don't like the prequels still agree with me. A lot of them do, on my opinion of this movie. So it's a 50-50 shot. I would still recommend going to see it because, I want you to have your experience, and I don't want you to take my opinion of it and treat it as gospel. I want you to go in with an open mind and just enjoy the movie. But if you are curious, really curious about my overall non-spoiler opinions about it, personally, as of right now, I think The Last Jedi is probably the worst one of the entire franchise. The absolute worst one. It pretty much took everything that George Lucas built up in the original 6 movies, episodes 1 through 6, and said, not really interested in that anymore. At least from where I was sitting. Some people disagree with me. Some people think that it didn't do that. But I was not impressed. I was really not impressed. And I wanted to love it. I did. The last thing I ever want to say is I do not like a Star Wars movie. And this is the first time. This is the first time I can legitimately say I walked out of that theater on Sunday night, seeing it again, and thinking, you know what? I really don't like this movie. And in fact, I don't even know if I want to show up for the next one. I probably will because I want to see what J.J. Abrams does with Episode 9. And there's a lot that could happen. I mean, I have no idea what's coming. But he's got a lot of work on his hands. I will say that. So, I don't know. Maybe it'll get better with these spin-off movies and this new trilogy that Last Jedi director Rian Johnson is going to be making. Maybe. I hope so. But I don't know. And it's this weird thing, too, because I went into it and I watched it the first time and I really enjoyed it. But, again, that was very surface level kind of stuff, not having a chance to really delve deep into it and really analyze the story and compare it to the continuity. It's not even comparing it to past movies. It's putting this piece in the puzzle of the Star Wars saga, putting this alongside the story, the overall story of the past films, even Force Awakens, and thinking to myself, does this make sense? Does this build on the narrative that George Lucas created in the original trilogy and in the prequels, and then even in The Force Awakens, which I have plenty of problems with, but it set things up pretty nicely for things to be told in a pretty good fashion. I don't think this lived up to that. Now, maybe after pondering it some more, and maybe after seeing it a third time, maybe my opinion could change, but I don't really think so. I mean, this is similar to what happened with The Force Awakens. I went in watching it, thinking, oh, this is a great movie, even though I don't really have much time to digest everything, and then seeing it again, and then seeing it a third time, still enjoying some of it, because I realized, hey, they could take this in a really cool direction in the next 2 movies. But really disliking how much they relied on nostalgia. Well, they still relied on plenty of nostalgia in this one, but they also tried some things. It was a risky movie. It was a really risky movie that Rian Johnson directed. He took some pretty big risks, and I think plenty of them just bombed. Just completely bombed. So, that's my non-spoiler review of I almost said The Force Awakens, of The Last Jedi. So, go see it. I want you to go see it, and you have your own opinion. I want to be wrong on this, but after seeing it twice, I don't see how my opinion can change very much from this. From a lifelong, diehard Star Wars fan. Not just a fan of the movies, but of the books, of the video games, of, the TV series, everything, the Star Wars lore. Huge fan of all of it. And I think this movie took a massive dump on a good portion of it, personally. But maybe that's just me. We'll see what Disney does with the future of it, but I'm not too optimistic with it, personally. But anyway, that's it for the non-spoiler review. I'm going to come back, and on the other side of the break, for those of you who have seen the movie, I'm going to give you a spoiler review of The Last Jedi, get into a lot more detail of what I thought about specific moments in the movie, and the risks that Rian Johnson took. So if you have not seen it yet, skip the next 15 minutes of the show, come back, and you should be good. Or if you just don't want to risk coming in at the wrong time, sayonara, see you next week. But it's up to you. Just want to give you a forewarning, that way you know. So we'll do that on the other side of the break on this, the Blake Johnson program. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Back to the Blake Johnson program. Thank you so much for listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, and I would encourage you to check out the other programs that are on this wonderful network. Common Sense Radio with AJ Davis and Susan Swift, defenders of American exceptionalism, and all the other great shows, Bells of Liberty, and The Voice of Reason, HoloNet. We've got all kinds of different shows here on the Lanterns Radio Network that will really do you a lot of good and will not waste your time. So check those out. We've got so much more that you can listen to, and as long as you listen to my show as number one, that's all I care about, really. As long as you and I, are still best friends and the best of friends, that's all that matters. You can make those other hosts feel good about themselves if you want to, but in the end, you and me, yeah, we're a thing. We are a thing. So, anyway, let's go ahead and delve into my spoiler review of The Last Jedi. If you have not seen this movie yet and you're still here, I'm going to give you your last warning. This is a spoiler review of The Last Jedi. So if you don't want to hear this, skip the next 15 minutes, come back, and you should be good. But this is going to be a spoiler review for those who have seen the movie. Or if you just don't like Star Wars and you're not going to watch it, then hey, you can stay. But those who want to see it and don't want to hear anything about it, here's your chance to skip now. Okay, so here's the spoiler review. So I told you last break, I went in watching it the first time and enjoying it, but at the same time, not having a chance to really digest much of anything in the movie because so much happened in it, and it was so different. It felt so different from all the other movies. I wasn't sure what to make of it. And like I said, other things were involved as well. Other factors played in. I knew I was coming back the next day to watch it again. So I'm like, I don't really pay too much attention. I'll just sit and enjoy whatever surface level stuff they throw at me. That's pretty much where I was at, I'll admit. But then I came back Sunday, and I watched it as I watch the other Star Wars movies. Really taking it all in. Really looking at the story. Really looking at what they were trying to do with this film. And I have to tell you, I think this is quite possibly the worst movie in the entire franchise. I think this took so many good things that we loved, that we knew and loved from the originals, from the prequels, even from Rogue One. Well, maybe not necessarily from Rogue One, but from The Force Awakens, things that it built up and left us in suspense over, and just said, nah, we don't really care about much of that. We're just going to do our own thing. And normally, I am okay with that. I mean, I went into this movie wanting something new. I wanted them to break away from the over-reliance on nostalgia, rehashing things that we've already seen before. I like Force Awakens okay. I don't like it very much now after seeing this one. But I liked it okay, but I hated the fact they relied so much on nostalgia. It felt like a rerun of A New Hope, the very first one. So when I found out from my friends, hey, this one is going to, do a lot of new stuff that we've never seen before, I was like, yes, awesome. And it did, in some ways. I would say about 50% of the movie was new. Or maybe not even that high. But the other percentage of it was just a rehash of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Now, here's why I think so negatively about The Last Jedi. Here are some of my problems with it. Okay, so it starts off right where The Force Awakens left off. The Resistance is leaving, I can't even remember the name of the planet they were on at the end of Force Awakens, but they were leaving that planet, they're evacuating, and the First Order shows up to decimate them, and they have this dreadnought weapon that's gonna, blow them up. So they're trying to evacuate all the transports and whatnot, and, the first 30 minutes maybe of the movie looked pretty promising. Aside from the fact that quickly into it, I was starting to feel just a little uncomfortable. The reason being is their attempts at humor. Because they start off with this weird prank call between Poe Dameron and General Hux. And, with Poe pretending not to hear General Hux, and then just, Hux being, we will destroy you, and then Poe's like, wait, I didn't hear you, what'd you say? And he's just stalling and everything. I mean, it wasn't the worst thing, it wasn't terrible, but it was just kind of out of place. And as it went more into the movie, it got worse. And it felt like Star Wars was trying to go the route of the Marvel movies. It felt like they were trying to mix in Guardians of the Galaxy and, the other comedic aspects of the recent Marvel movies and just mix it into Star Wars. I mean, you literally have a scene where Luke Skywalker walks up to this alien, I don't even know what the creature is, and starts milking it. Putting milk in his bottle and just drinking it raw for no reason. I'm like, that was gross. What is that? Okay. It wasn't really that funny. It was just odd. And the first time he meets Rey, she walks up to him with Anakin's lightsaber, with Luke's lightsaber, Luke's father's lightsaber, and he grabs it and just tosses it over his chest and just walks away. And I'm like, okay, that's odd, but okay. And I think the worst part of this movie is just the way they dealt with Luke's character. The reason I love the original trilogy, the reason why I consider Return of the Jedi my favorite, beside its flaws, is because I love what they did with Luke Skywalker. They brought in the ultimate redemption story, a son who, after being brought up and thinking that Darth Vader's the most evil person ever in the galaxy, there's no hope for him, then finding out Darth Vader's my father, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? He goes in and not wanting to face Vader, not wanting to attack his own father, and he finally goes and he finds out there's still good in him, despite all the evil he's done. And he redeems him. He rejects the dark side. He almost gets killed for it, and he helps save his father. And at the end of the movie, it's built up to be, oh, Luke's gonna restart the Jedi Order. And with the Legends timeline, with the video games, they did pretty well in rebuilding it. It looked pretty awesome. But in this one, instead, what they decided to do was take Luke's character, turn him into a hermit where he's on an island just waiting to die because he failed Kylo Ren, because he failed the Jedi Order that he was building. And you come to find out that Luke, oddly, decides that he's going to kill Ben Solo while he's training him because he senses the dark side in him, and it's just so bad, it's so powerful, he's just going to kill him, which completely goes against Luke's character. Luke has never been one to do that. And so I had a big problem with that, and it made me think, wow, what's happened to Luke? After all his training, you would think that he would have learned something by now. And then the cameo appearance of Yoda. I mean, at first it was interesting, but then the more I'm thinking about, like, how is Luke in this state? Like, literally, he takes the ancient Jedi text from, I guess, from the original Jedi Order, and he relies solely on them. And he basically does what caused the Jedi to fall in the prequels. They relied so much on their own religion that eventually they began to abandon what really made the Jedi stand out in the first place. And that's what Luke was doing in this one. And you would think, of all the people that wouldn't do that, you would think it would be Luke. You would think that he would, correct the mistakes that the Jedi made. And in fact, Yoda in Empire said, you must unlearn what you have learned. Well, clearly that didn't happen with Luke. He didn't unlearn what he learned. And he just became this character that really didn't grow very much at all. In fact, I would submit there was some degrowth there. He kind of went backwards in his thinking. What made matters worse was the training of Rey on that planet. That it was terrible. I mean, in The Empire Strikes Back, and I guess this really isn't a big surprise if you think about it, but in The Empire Strikes Back, you have this training with Yoda, and then, he goes into the cave, faces a fake Darth Vader, the mask blows up, and it's Luke's own face in it. Kind of a warning that, hey, this could be you if you aren't careful, if you become reckless. You could wind up turning to the dark side. And then he abandons his training, goes off to face Darth Vader when Yoda and Obi-Wan say, hey, don't do this, you're not ready yet. And he goes off and does it anyway, and learns, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. And gets defeated and everything, and then eventually comes back, and it seems like he's learned his lesson, but he's still a little headstrong in Return of the Jedi. But even still, Yoda and Obi-Wan encourage him to say, hey, you've got to face Darth Vader, but you've got to be mindful. Well, he does face Darth Vader, and it looks like he's really learned some things, and that he has grown in areas that the Jedi failed in, the Old Republic. So it leaves you thinking that Luke's going to be this great trainer, that he's going to train the Jedi Order, and it's going to be this great, truly, new era for the Jedi. And really, that never happened. He failed the first time because he, for whatever reason, lost hope with Ben Solo and decided, hey, I'm just going to kill him. And of course, we can understand why Ben would turn against Luke. Because he wakes up and he sees Luke with a lightsaber. He's like, he's about to kill me. So he attacks him and retreats. So in all reality, I can understand why Ben Solo was troubled. I can understand why he decided to join Snoke, because it looked like the Jedi was about to kill him. So, that happens. And Rey, she barely gets any training, like I said. And it just seems like the Force is cheapened in this movie. In the prequels and in the originals, they made it seem like the Force was this, massive, substance that, surrounds everything, binds the galaxy together. And of course, Luke says that in this movie, but he doesn't really explain it very much. and he just trashes the Jedi and says it's time for the Jedi to end, and it doesn't really explain what the problem is. And then you have Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren, I don't understand what they were doing with this character. I mean, I really don't understand it. He's a guy who can't defeat an untrained scavenger in The Force Awakens. Somehow is able to just flick a lightsaber around with Snoke, clearly a really powerful character, someone who supposedly is able to just read minds and fake, connections in the Force and all these things. Just by the flick of his wrist, Kylo Ren just kills Snoke. Just randomly kills Snoke. And now we'll never know what Snoke is. Now it's clear that Snoke isn't that important at all to the story. Now it's kind of useless. And then it seemed like Rey and Ren are going to team up. They don't team up. Ren just comes back, tries to annihilate everyone. It doesn't work out. And it's just another rehash of Empire Strikes Back on the Hoth planet with the speeders and the AT-ATs. And it's just, I'm like, what is this? What is this movie? And then, of course, the ultimate ruin. They kill off Luke's character in this movie and make it into a half Obi-Wan Kenobi, half Yoda scene. And it didn't work. It really did not work. Because now, how is the Jedi going to be rebuilt with someone who still had very little training, and the Jedi texts are gone? Luke's not there. Leia's not there. None of the other Jedi are there. Maybe they'll come back as Force ghosts and help out. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of that could save this thing. But ultimately, it seemed like they were just rushing through this and just kind of saying, we don't really care about the Skywalker legacy. We don't really care about this. We're just going to throw it away and focus on the new characters who really aren't that interesting. I mean, easily, by far, my least favorite character in this whole series is Rose. I don't understand what they were doing with this character. She serves no purpose to this story. They could have easily have taken her out and it wouldn't have mattered one bit. She's in the way. She's really annoying. And quite honestly, what with the, social justice, liberal progressive propaganda, income inequality, gender equality, all these kinds of stuff that they brought into this movie, I'm thinking, and it was focused in on Rose. She was the one who was driving force this message. And then, of course, Finn was there to help her too. It just really made me like this movie even less. And then they wasted Captain Phasma, killed her off, just completely obliterated any interest whatsoever in that character. Poe Dameron, kind of a waste of a character, maybe a slightly interesting, but still serves virtually no purpose to this movie. Finn should have died in Force Awakens. He should have died in this movie. He didn't. He's still around, still not really serving any purpose. And then the whole Leia doing a Superman in the very beginning of the movie, it's kind of ridiculous. And they waited way too long to make any sort of lasting, story revolving around Leia, because in the Return of the Jedi, they built it up to where Leia is this powerful, she's this, she has the power of the Force as well. She can become a Jedi like Luke, but she never becomes a Jedi. We only see her use the Force once, really once, anyway, and it doesn't matter all that much because she doesn't do a whole lot for the rest of the film. So, I don't know, I was not happy about that at all. I really wasn't. And there are more criticisms of it that I could lay out, but honestly, it's just a waste of time. It really is a waste of time. And I want to like it. I want to believe that Episode 9 is going to redeem everything, and it's going to do something that makes everything else make all that much more sense. But I don't see how that's going to happen. And it's J.J. Abrams. I mean, he directed Force Awakens. I don't particularly enjoy Force Awakens. I mean, I like it okay, but it's not my favorite. So him coming back doesn't really give me much hope. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll probably still go watch it just so I can finally say for sure what this trilogy is. Do I like it? Do I not? But I'm not going in with high hopes. Definitely not going in with high hopes. So we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to take a break, come back, and we will finish off the show with some more news and analysis coming up next on the Blake Johnson Program. Welcome back, everyone, to the Blake Johnson Program. I want to spend a few minutes talking about my thoughts on the Roy Moore election. I'm not going to spend much time on it, honestly. The only reason I'm talking about this is because we've talked about it on the show a couple of times, and I feel I wouldn't be doing you a good service by just ignoring it. So I will offer a quick conclusion to this story and just move on. Well, it might not be so quick. I'm going to try to make it quick. Obviously, as you all know, Roy Moore lost the election in Alabama, which was a little surprising, honestly. I mean, this is a state that Donald Trump won pretty handedly in both the primary and general election, if I'm remembering correctly. So this should have been an easy win for the GOP. Now, I will admit to you that Roy Moore was not a good candidate political-wise. Politics-wise, he was not a good candidate. Doesn't mean that I think he's, guilty or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just I don't think, politically speaking, he was good for the party. I would have much preferred someone like Mo Brooks or someone else who can articulate the conservative argument and the conservative message without looking like an idiot. But that's just me. So, as you know, I predicted on the show that Roy Moore would win, and he would probably win handedly. And taking into account the last election and all that, and I thought that people would get so fed up. Well, they did get fed up, but they were fed up on all sides. The people voted, there was a lot of, I can't remember the percentage-wise, but it was pretty much what decided the election and what got Doug Jones to win. More Republicans either didn't vote at all or voted third party. And because of that, not as many voted for Roy Moore. Because of that, more people voted for Doug Jones, carrying him over to victory in a state that hasn't had a Democrat in office in 25 years, I believe. 25 years. Over 2 decades. So that's embarrassing in and of itself. But what's even more embarrassing about all of this is the reaction from, quite frankly, the conservative media. My beef isn't with the liberal media. I already know what they're going to say. I don't really care. They're hypocrites, they're liars, they're crazy people. I already know what they're going to say. You know what they're going to say. But I expect a lot more from people who claim to be conservative, claim to be for due process, claim to be for reason, for mature thinking. There are quite a bit of people that I think led others astray because they have big platforms, big egos, and big mouths. One of those people, surprisingly for me, was Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck, I think, has been the biggest hypocrite on the Roy Moore issue. And it pains me to say this as someone who is in radio because of Glenn Beck, who is in politics, caring about politics because of him. It pains me to say that he has been the biggest letdown of this whole thing. Here's a guy who has been called every name in the book, accused of every nasty thing that you can think of, who was a dirtbag for a good part of his life, but then changed his life around for the better, is now a Christian, all that good stuff. And the guy who worked at Fox News saw all of the slimy stuff there, saw all of the, corruption, and just the nastiness in not just Fox News, but just in the media in general. So he's seen it all. Here's a guy who brings on Bill O'Reilly onto his show every single Friday, spends a good portion of his show on Friday with him. Bill O'Reilly, a guy who's been accused of sexual harassment, of misconduct, of abuse, of treating women like garbage. And he's still given a big platform on Glenn's show because Glenn knows him. He worked with him. He had a close relationship with him. He doesn't believe the accusations against Bill O'Reilly are true. That's okay. I'm completely fine with that. If you believe that, there's nothing wrong with having that opinion. But you've got to be consistent with that opinion. There has yet to be a shred of actual evidence proving that Roy Moore did any of those heinous things that he's being accused of. Now, am I saying that he's completely innocent? No. But that's the point. We don't know if he's innocent or guilty. You see, my problem isn't with people who think that Roy Moore is guilty and voted based on that. That's fine. You can have that opinion. My beef isn't with you. We can disagree. That doesn't mean anything to me. But I cannot take the hypocrisy. I cannot take the inconsistency. And it's not just with Glenn. It's with people like Ben Shapiro, Jonah Goldberg, Eric Erickson, Matt Walsh, all these other people who, not quite as much with Matt Walsh, but I still have some issues with his analysis on this. People who are just so eager to just jump on whatever bandwagon to make themselves look good, and at the same time making themselves look stupid, because they're doing the very thing that they warn others against, and that's jumping to conclusions, jumping on bandwagons, not calling for due process. And, they can talk a good game all they want. I heard people like Glenn Beck and others say, we gotta have due process. You can say that all you want to, but on the other side, if you're saying, I believe all the accusers and I believe he's guilty, that really doesn't back up your statement that you believe in due process. Because you're on the one hand saying we shouldn't condemn him, and on the other hand, you're condemning him. To me, if we are going to be a group of people, conservatives, that should be taken seriously, then we've got to be consistent on things that matter. If you believe that Roy Moore is most likely guilty of these things, like I said, that's okay. You can believe that. That doesn't make you a hypocrite. But at the same time, you can't then start defending people that you do like because you like them, even though they've been accused of either the same things or worse, but it still hasn't been proven yet. There's got to be a level of consistency here. And it's really not that hard. Here's the thing. I am skeptical of the accusers of Bill O'Reilly, and I am also skeptical of the accusers of Roy Moore. That being said, I don't rule out the fact that they could both be guilty of something that is truly despicable. I'm leaving that door open. But we've got to be honest about that. But too many people aren't. And I don't like that at all. I wish people would get their heads out of their own butts, but people have platforms, people have shows, people have egos. They want to look tall and powerful, but they really look weak and petty and small. That's why I'm in no eager to be famous whatsoever. I don't want to be among those guys. I want to be my own person. I like being my own person. I like doing this show. I like having a more intimate setting with you guys, instead of it being one of those situations where you're famous and you're constantly pressured to say and do things that you don't really believe. And I think that's a constant struggle for people in the mainstream media and in conservative media and just any media in general that gives you a platform to say whatever you want to say, but also gives you incentives to say other things just to be more powerful and get more money. But that's my basic opinion on that. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. We got Christmas coming up in just a week, guys. Just a week away. I cannot believe it. I'm so ready for it. And then 2018, 2 weeks away. Here we are. Get ready for that. And I'm excited for the new year and what that'll bring. And hopefully we'll have some guests lined up for you on this show. I'm working on that right now. So anyway, that's going to do it for the Blake Johnson program. We will see you back here next time. Take care. Have a great rest of your week. And God bless.